Mike Crowley, I think we're going to agree on
Yeah.
this movie. I wasn't sure if we were going to. Mike
Right,
Crowley,
right.
if you'll probably agree, because my recollection of The Devil's Advocate, which just passed its 25-year anniversary, a couple weeks ago, I didn't remember it being that good. I always kind of liked the movie
Yeah.
because of, the way it's trying to say what it's trying to say, but there was a big roadblock with me and accents, specifically Keanu Reeves playing a Florida lawyer transported to the Big Apple, and whatever he was doing. In fact, this is the last show of kind of Scarathon 2022 for October, and there's some thematic tie-ins to other episodes that I've done this month, including Bram Stoker's Dracula, also featuring Keanu Reeves with a questionable accent, and Poltergeist, which I talked about on Friday, featuring Craig T. Nelson, who I forgot was in this movie, playing like a pseudo Donald Trump type character. So yeah, there's lots to get into here. But how are you doing, man? It's been way too long.
Oh my God. Yeah, I haven't been on here in forever just because, work and, critic stuff. Oh, Oscar season, that's coming up. And then I also just covered the Chicago International Film Festival, which was fun, but also kind of exhausting after reviewing like 8 movies and then doing 3 interviews at the same time and going to parties. But yeah, like it's fun, it was good work, but I've been okay. I'm kind of happy to just be on your show again, just to like kind of shoot the shit about a film that, yeah, I it's a movie I always really liked, and maybe not for the right reasons. I always just liked how big and over the top and silly it was, because it really kind of came out in that era where the 90s, like everything that was a theatrical experience was very dramatic. Everything was over dramatized, like hit over your head, and they don't make movies like that anymore. And I think that's kind of why I like this film. It's just, you just watch it and you go, yeah, like I get the whole thing about temptation and Satan, trying to reel us in through our own vanity. I mean, they literally even say the theme of the film, vanity, is my favorite sin, but it it ties together in a consistently fun movie that I think is like over 2 hours long, but doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I think if you watch the unrated cut, which I didn't know there was until I was looking up the Blu-ray this afternoon, it's like 4 extra minutes of, whatever there is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does kind of fly by. And it's also the rare, it's kind of like an event movie without having an event tied to it. It's not based on
Hmm.
an IP or a comic book or a sequel or anything, but it is a big studio picture that doesn't have a big studio climax. I
Hmm.
mean, the big confrontation, the big showdown of this movie is two guys kind of yelling at each other in this, in front of this altar in a lawyer's office.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a bit of, 1997 CGI spectacle for like about a minute when things catch on fire or whatever.
Yeah.
But this really is a movie that's about, themes and ideas, which, we don't get that much anymore in terms of mainstream fare.
Yeah, I mean I did this one thing called Movie Oki. It was held by this guy who actually is a graphic designer in Hollywood and stuff like that. And anyways, like basically you quote the film scene that you're doing kind of like karaoke, and mine was Al Pacino's final speech in The Devil's Advocate talking about God, because that movie kind of has sort of like a Dark Knight Joker effect where the bad guy is making you agree with him a little bit. And it kind of introduces that sort of subtext, even as over the top and silly as it is. It does kind of make you go, yeah, we do sort of feel like we're placed as puppets on a stage for someone who is laughing at us, but then we have to remember not to be tempted by the devil. The only thing that like kind of threw me off is like Keanu Reeves's like final decision in the end to be good. It seems sort of like out of character for someone who is otherwise a complete selfish asshole throughout the film.
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, like let's rewind the tape to the God thing,
Yeah.
because something that struck me at the end of this is, well, maybe we should set the table. What is The Devil's Advocate about? We'll get back to the God thing in a
Oh,
second.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
For those who haven't seen it, turn back now because we're going to spoil the hell out of the whole thing. And I assume a lot of people who are watching this, have seen it over the last quarter century, which makes my arteries harden just saying it.
Yeah.
But okay, Keanu Reeves plays Kevin Lomax, this Florida attorney who has won 64 straight cases. He's kind of bulletproof. We open with a very young Heather Matarazzo on the witness stand, and he is cross-examining her. Essentially, she claims that she was the victim of sexual assault by her math teacher, and Mr. Lomax is defending this math teacher, kind of presuming that he's innocent until proven guilty and all that stuff. But this guy's like a sweaty, lump of a man who's kind of leering at this, traumatized girl in the stand. And then Lomax looks down as we look down and see the guy as she's describing how he touched her, he's fondling the underside of the desk. And then we see that he's got his hand down his pants, almost cartoonishly. And you see Kevin Lomax kind of turning his body so that the people in the jury, the audience, I guess the regular court seats or whatever right behind him can't see what's going on. And he storms out during a recess, and because he realizes this guy has done some shady stuff, goes into the bathroom, and a guy from the press who knows him and has been following his career says, well, you can't win them all. I guess it's time for the streak to come to an end.
Yeah.
And Kevin looks at himself in the mirror and has to make a decision. Like, I'm not gonna let this streak end. So he goes in, comes up with a disgusting yet again bulletproof case against the witness has been sexually assaulted by this man.
That part was ridiculous a little bit, but yeah.
it was, but I mean it works in terms of the movie.
In dramatics, it works, yeah.
Right. And it's not so much the truth or justice, but the art of getting the jury to doubt, to get them on his side, to not let this guy go to jail. And so, of course, that gets the attention of this high-priced firm in New York. John Milton is played by Al Pacino. He's the lead partner in this big, powerful firm that has all sorts of international dealings. They call Kevin and his wife, Mary, played by Charlize Theron, who is all of probably 23 years old in this, and had that awesome bit of baby fat, but was also saddled with a horrendous Southern accent that I'll give Keanu Reeves this. His accent's pretty lousy. I mean, I kind of got used to it throughout the course of the film, but at least it's consistent. He never stops that, as you called it before we jumped on, foghorn leghorn accent.
Yeah. Hers
goes in and out like a bad cable signal. It's really weird.
Yeah, and it's funny, when they were doing that movie, I was just doing my IMDb trivia. They were actually 10 years apart too. Charlize Theron was 21 and Keanu was 31 in the movie, but yet they're supposed to be the same age. But I don't know, they kind of look the same age, so I guess it worked. So
yeah, I mean they're law school sweethearts or whatever, and they work together, and this movie is partially a Rosemary's Baby type thing where they go off to New York and they decide to stay there because Milton hires Kevin to be the star lawyer and take on these big high profile cases. And Charlize Theron, who I can't remember what Marianne, what she does for a job.
Do you remember? I don't think she had a job in that movie.
No, she did in Florida. Something involving cases and filing stuff and claims or something like that. But when she goes to New York, there's no reason for her to work because Kevin's making all this money now. So she basically gets set up in this luxury multi-bedroom apartment and has all this new set of friends, and they're basically the wives of the other lawyers working for this firm. But of course, as it turns out, based on the title, The Devil's Advocate, and advocate is another term for lawyer. Keanu Reeves is working for the devil. John Milton is Satan, and all the other hangers-on in his firm are demons or people who are in service of demons, which is why I brought up the Rosemary's Baby thing. So yeah, it's one of those films that I feel like if the trailer hadn't ruined it by showing Al Pacino actually in church sticking his finger in the holy water and watching it boil.
And he does that face too. He does a semi Nicolas Cage when he's grabbing the ass. And what movie was that where he did?
That was Face Off.
Face Off,
which has a connection. Actually, the guy who played the pedo school teacher was also in Face Off, which was the same year as this movie. He played one of the guys in jail that I think Nicolas Cage fights.
7 degrees of pedophile actor.
Actors playing pedophile characters. Let's be very careful here.
Yes.
Yes.
They're just characters.
Right. But as far as we know. But sorry about that. But no, I feel like if the trailer hadn't given that away, you could almost get through half of this movie just thinking it's about this lawyer being seduced, and then have it be I feel like the screenplay was written almost as this being a big reveal, like, oh my God, this is actually the devil and not just, a metaphor for temptation.
Well, if they didn't call it the devil's advocate, then maybe, but
right. But I mean,
like they put it right in the title. So he's going to be the devil. The whole marketing is like, oh, Al Pacino is going to be the devil. Wow, because that was like during the whole Heat era where everyone's like, De Niro, Pacino, holy shit.
Right, but my point is, like, you could even have the title, The Devil's Advocate, the poster of, like, all the red and Pacino standing behind Keanu, and have it be metaphorical, but not push the angle of like he's actually Satan. You could watch a movie about a high-priced lawyer and just think, oh my God, this guy's the devil, and then halfway through, like, oh my God, he's really the devil.
Yeah. Well, I think they kind of make it obvious when there's just like they have like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse chasing the principal from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
But I'm saying that's much later in the movie.
Oh,
like,
okay.
I feel like you play it as like a straight legal drama about the corruption of a small town lawyer moving to the Big Apple, and then you realize, oh, there's a lot more going on here.
That could work.
Enough talking about the movie that I wish I'd seen. We'll talk about the movie that we did see, because it's very entertaining. And I think it plays Keanu Reeves, I think is pretty excellent in this, because despite the accent, he gets all the emotions down right, including something that I don't think plays as well today as it might have in 97. I can't really be sure because I was only 20 years old, but Charlize Theron is saddled with, at a certain point, just playing the hysterical woman part. Like, I understand that she is freaking out because she's seeing demons everywhere, but it just comes across as like, Keanu Reeves comes home from a hard day of work and she's just like yelling at him because he's never around, and she's like crying and throwing these tantrums. I'm like, it needs to be dialed back a little bit, because Al Pacino should be the only like number 11 performance in this film.
Yeah, not to mention, like, every time we see like a woman in that movie, it's like either like hysterical stay-at-home mom or soon-to-be mom if she tried to be, or it's also like just a sex object, which is basically like Connie Nielsen's character, which is she's supposed to be temptation, which that was weird in the end when she's his sister, and then he's like, anyway, she's your sister, but you wanted to bang her. Here's your chance. Like, what? And that's where.
Well, I was saying, my wife said she came in and out like through this whole thing, but she stayed for like the last 20 minutes, the big climax, and then she's like, "Wait a second, that's his sister, and the dad's gonna watch."
Yeah, and like Keanu didn't have a problem with that, but then he's like, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm gonna blow my brains out. I'm like, what?
I mean, what other alternative is there? Because I don't think he's gonna be able to perform under those conditions we just laid out. So at least that pistol would fire. But it also, what occurred to me watching this is that this was 2 years before Keanu was in The Matrix. This movie is sort of like The Matrix, because at the end of the film, I know we're jumping all around here, but Kevin discovers the truth about his father, goes to confront him after Mary has committed suicide rather horribly, and at the aid of one of John Milton's minions. And he, as you mentioned, decides, instead of banging his sister and taking over the family business, he's going to kill himself, because if he dies, then John Milton he would have to essentially start over again and find a new protege, and there's this kind of ticking time clock element to the millennium, because that's when, this is 1997, so everything's about the year 2000. So they're looking at, I've got to find another kid, and that's going to take like another 25 years and all this other stuff, and I have to hope that he's special, so you're my last shot, kid. Kevin blows his brains out, but then we do the whole thing where it takes us right back to the opening scene where he's in the bathroom making the decision about, is he going to actually defend this guy that he knows is guilty of raping a child? And he goes back into the court and he does the right thing and he excuses himself, even though it risks him being disbarred. And we see the newspaper reporter guy saying, what are you going to do next? And he's like, I don't know. They're probably going to kick me out for this. And he's like, not if I have anything to do with it. You're going to be on 60 Minutes. I'm going to make you famous. Yep. And he's like, really? And then, as you point out, after Kevin and Mary leave the scene, the reporter guy morphs back into Al Pacino. He says, vanity is my favorite vice. So it's almost like Keanu Reeves is stuck in this weird alternate reality where he's going to be groundhogging this thing over and over again until the Matrix, i.e. the devil, gets what it wants.
Yeah, see, I think that would be a cool sort of fan theory. Like, what if this is just one of the Matrix's simulations of the one?
Oh, shit. Is Kevin actually Neo?
Yeah, like Kevin was Neo. It was a failure. Neo rejected it, and then he started over, because then he starts over again in this new Matrix. Keep rebooting it,
Yeah, fucking John Milton turns into Agent Smith. He's like, Mr. Anderson, the lawyer thing didn't work out, so he made you a computer programmer.
Yeah.
Oh, man. It's a good movie. Oh, speaking of people with problems around children, you referenced the Eddie Barzoon, the lawyer, the supervising attorney jogging through the park, played by Jeffrey Jones, who had some problems with things showing up on his computer a number of years ago, and he was proto-canceled.
Yeah, because I knew he was canceled for like some like pedophile thing. I don't know what it was, but yeah, I guess it was kiddie porn.
Which is, I mean,
was that what the principal was looking up in Ferris Bueller? All right, sorry. He just had like little magazines. Like,
it paints like everything that he's done in like this weird light now, because I still like him a lot as a performer, as an actor. But it's that thing where I can't watch him now without thinking, but all this other stuff happened. Especially you ever see The Hunt for Red October?
No, I know of it, but I've never seen it. Yeah.
Watch The Hunt for Red October. It's a legitimately great movie, and he has a part in it where he's like, he's in it for 5 minutes, right? And he plays this sub-expert that Alec Baldwin goes to talk about this, rogue Russian sub. And Jeffrey Jones starts off his speech by talking about when he was a kid, his dad told him something about submarines and weapons. But he says, when I was a kid, my daddy told me about this submarine. I'm like, even when I saw this movie when I was 12, I'm like, your daddy? What?
Oh,
what
yeah, that's creepy. Oh, God. Yeah, it's just like, it was weird. Like with Woody Allen films, the only thing I knew about him before I even knew about him like raping his daughter was about him like marrying his stepdaughter. And even as a little kid, I'm like, wait, this guy makes romantic movies starring himself and he's dating his stepdaughter. That's weird. I don't want to see these movies.
Well, you say you're right what you know. I don't know. Woody Allen's another kind of problem spot for me, because I do think he's a genius, but at what cost? But let's get back to something that's more fun to talk about, like
like Satan,
the devil, yeah,
because it is Halloween,
Yes,
and
this is our big Halloween episode. This is as close as I'm going to get to being in costume, as wearing a black shirt for the occasion.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of fun, lawyery stuff in here. I particularly like the introduction of Kevin and Mary to the high society of this New York law firm. They go to this big party, and like all the brass are there. And we find out there's all these people from international corporations and all types of business dealings. But as we are kind of privy to all the small talk at the party, all of it is about how to screw people over. And like, oh, well, if they give us any problems, we'll just like blackmail them with this, we've got these secrets, or we've got these files on them. And we'll just use our muscle if they don't play ball. It's kind of terrifying, because we've seen how many times we've seen these movies where you hear small talk and, it's just kind of like innocuous stuff. This is all just the worst people you can imagine.
Yeah, they're basically just laying their cards out on the table and like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna out lawyer them and throw them in jail? No. So and she's immediately kind of surrounded by you can see why Charlize Theron kind of becomes a little paranoid and scared that Kevin might be cheating on her, considering, there's that scene where there's the two women in the elevator with Al Pacino, and he says, "Hey, do you want to come up to my floor and talk about something?" And Keanu Reeves resists the temptation, but they're kind of like kissing Al Pacino and like licking his neck and looking at Keanu at the same time. And there's a deleted scene in there too, like when they're at that party, like Charlize Theron, she like goes into a room and there's like a three-way happening and they notice her and they like invite her to join. But like I think that
Wow.
yeah, that might have kind of strengthened her character's motivation, I think, a bit if they included that scene, because she does seem sort of generically hysterical in it at certain points. Um, but then, the thing that kind of like always threw me off with Kevin's final decision in the end is like when, the devil actually tells Kevin, "Hey, you should take care of your wife. Don't worry about the case." What does he say? She gets well, and then I end up losing the case, because that's what he was afraid of. Like she would get well before he could even lose it. So then, like, if he didn't even care about her from the beginning, why would he all of a sudden care about all of his actions at the end?
Well, I think his thing was, if he dropped the case and then she got well, he would resent her because he stepped
Yeah.
away from it, right?
Hmm.
Which is a very, kind of human thing. And also, I think part of the genius of the conception of the devil in this movie, which is basically he puts out all the temptations in the world, but the divinity of mankind is the ability to resist those temptations. The devil's Pacino says, "I don't actually do anything like, as far as, I don't make people do stuff. I just make it really hard for them to say no."
Yeah.
And as he's kind of going through all of Kevin's various sins and indiscretions in that final scene, you realize, as he does, that all along he was being given an out. Um, just like one of my favorite scenes I had completely forgotten about is the two of them are riding in a subway car on their
Hmm.
way to see a fight at Madison Square Garden, and Pacino's just talking to Kevin about whatever, and you see his eyes are looking past Kevin to these two Hispanic guys who are standing kind of right next to him, and he's like, Pacino's staring one of them down and kind of like smiling, and the guy's like, "What the fuck are you looking at?" He's
Hmm.
like, "No, seriously, you got a problem, man?" And he's like, "No, I'm good." Uh, and then the dude pulls out a box cutter, and then Pacino says, he starts speaking in Spanish,
Yeah.
saying, "Look, like 5 minutes after your apartment, or after you left your apartment, your best friend took your girlfriend, in the kitchen. They're smoking crack and they're gonna do it on your bed in your favorite green bedspread." And he says, "Look, if you get off at this next stop, you can get back home, catch the next train and get there just in time to find him. You'll thank me in the morning." He said, "Put that knife to a better use."
Yeah.
And the guy, as he's leaving the train, is kind of freaked out because he's like, "How do you know all this?" That's the expression on his face. And he
Yeah.
said, "You ain't right, man."
Yeah.
And the Pacino says, "Oh, I'm right." But again, he gives him the knowledge, and because he knows what the guy's going to do, but it's still up
Hmm.
to him whether or not he gets himself under control enough to, maybe he does confront them, but he doesn't knife both of them.
Yeah.
Not a double homicide situation. Or maybe he just ditches his best friend and leaves his girlfriend or whatever. It's all about that choice. And then we get a bit of insight into Kevin, because Kevin's like, "What was that all about?" And Pacino says, "Yeah, I just told them that if they didn't leave us alone, you're going to beat the crap out of them."
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
Kevin, like, I don't know if he believed that or not, but
I feel like he did, because there's no, like, pause or hesitation. They're just both kind of
yeah.
like laughing it off, and then the scene cuts.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's I could
But he's
almost like
right.
watch a TV series about this these manipulations. It's so much fun.
Yeah, well, because he's right. He sets the stage. He wants that guy to kill, the girlfriend, so then he can probably just go to hell, right? And he's basically complaining that God, I guess, he gives us instincts, he gives us and he thinks he gives us free will, but he doesn't. And what the devil's giving us is temptation, but in his argument is temptation for something we want that God won't let us have, which is pleasure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that is a persuasive argument.
Yeah.
And another thing that I like, a detail of this film that offers a balance, is Kevin's mom,
Mm-hmm.
who, she's very religious. She goes to church. By all accounts, she's not the kind of judgmental, hypocritical churchgoer that we see portrayed in a lot of these kinds of movies. She's a very
Yeah.
loving mom. And it turns out that, 31 years ago, whatever, she went to New York on a Bible trip or something,
Yeah.
met Pacino, and who was, I guess, posing as a waiter at the time, and then had Kevin. And that's how she knows when she sees, or John Milton years later. She gets like really freaked out, and even then she doesn't like get hysterical or cause
Mm-hmm.
a scene. She just kind of like goes from like, oh, it's so great to be here in the city. She just kind of shuts down. She's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just gonna take my leftovers and go back to the apartment. I'll see it
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow. But yeah, the balance of that is she is a content, caring person. She, loves being in her church. She doesn't seem to have the need for that, fast-paced city slicker lifestyle and everything. But temptation doesn't seem like it would have much of an effect on her because she has everything that she needs.
Yeah. And the thing is like because she has everything, she seems a little more, she seems happier. And Kevin was probably even happier when he was just a little Florida lawyer instead of, this guy who lived like literally on, and I love the production design of the film when they're on the top of the building that has the waterfall,
Yeah, the
with
infinity pool, right?
yeah, with the infinity pool, and it's overlooking all of Manhattan. So basically the entire city is at Kevin's feet, and instead of just kind of being, and with all that stuff, like his life didn't get any better. It just got worse when he got, more things. And I guess I guess if the movie did have a theme, it would be like less is more.
Right. And
Yeah.
even that's Mary's predicament is she gets this great big apartment, all these like new friends, and they go out shopping and lunching and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But she, the one who I can't remember her name, but she's the one that reveals herself to be a demon in the changing room. But she says, when I want to see my husband, I make an appointment. And they kind of laugh about it. And Mary's like, wait, are you serious? Because none of these guys are around. They just have these wives at her home who are, bored out of their minds. So they just spend the money. And Mary, to her credit, realizes that the money isn't enough. Now, it's interesting because later in the film, they kind of revisit this theme of Kevin winning all of these, 64 cases or whatever back in Florida, but also sort of acknowledging that the more he would win, the more he got an appetite for winning. And he sort of had an idea that maybe he wasn't being as scrupulous as he could. Like, I got
Mm.
the feeling that sex offender guy at the beginning was not the first person that he had an inkling of, like, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. And that may have been kicking the door further open for John Milton to reach out and say, hey, I think we could really do something with this.
Yeah, I mean, and in terms of believability, I can't help but laugh at that scene when it's like just a little school drawing of the principal calling him Pigman was enough to persuade a court to think, oh my God, she drew that hurtful drawing. Yeah, he didn't molest her. Like, what? But again, I think that was the devil actually manipulating the court and just letting them win, no matter how ridiculous the argument was.
Well, it was more that that drawing was to establish that she had it, kind of had a thing against the teacher, and was kind of telling other, sending that drawing around to other school kids to get them on her side in general against him, and then
Oh
make it
yeah,
more plausible that she could make up a lie and have it supported by other people.
right.
It's kind of like the a really perverse version of The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Mm,
Like, if you're gonna harass this teacher even just like by making fun of them, then if you come out with a story that, oh, he also touches me, then I'm like, well, you had it in for this guy, why would he listen to you? It's sick and it's twisted, but again, when you're just trying to convince a jury of 12 people, you just have to plant that seed of doubt, and that's the kind of thing that John Milton would know and that Kevin would pick up on for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Well, one thing that was fun about this movie was this was kind of during the whole like De Niro Pacino popularity era. And I think the whole selling point of this movie was that Al Pacino was going to play the devil. And this movie allows him to chew up a lot of the scenery. And that's kind of like when the movie shines the most. It just kind of becomes the Al Pacino show. But I have to say this is probably one of my favorite performances from Keanu Reeves, although it's like, yeah, the accent's bad, but at least he's like really trying, like
Yeah.
even if like not too hard. Where in other movies he kind of has that singular emotion where he's speaking in a whispery kind of voice, and here he's like really trying to like do something with it. I mean, Dracula is a whole other story where I just think that he wasn't given any direction, but that's a whole
Well,
other can of worms.
well, like this is around the time that I mean, Scent of a Woman was I think 5 or 6 years before this one. And that's when Pacino, I think, really started to get into the growling, like boisterous, like hoo-ah, and
Yeah.
like yelling all of his lines. In this movie, I feel like he had a little bit of that, but you could understand because he's the devil raging against God, like
Yeah.
literally. So you can understand that but he spends most of the movie, like 80% of it, he's restrained, he's kind of bemused, and it
Mhm.
totally works. And as far as Keanu Reeves' performance, I agree. And there's a moment where the two of them, I can't remember which scene it was because there's a bunch of scenes of the two of them talking to each other. But there's a scene where they're having a conversation. It's not the big climax, but I got the feeling like Keanu Reeves is really good in this scene. I
Mhm.
wonder if, as a 30-year-old performer, he's kind of like realizing he's in a movie with Al fucking Pacino. So he's got to step up his acting
Mhm.
game and try and bring some nuance to this Kevin character that maybe he wouldn't have if it was just anybody else, playing a generic devil.
Oh yeah. I mean, you look at something like The Matrix, it's like he just had to rely on the effects to do the acting for him in a way, and just like the effects of production design, cinematography, all that. Where Devil's Advocate, it's like, yes, I'm acting next to one of Hollywood's greatest legends. I cannot screw this up. And I think that's why it's like, yeah, like his accent's distracting, but I really like the effort he put towards it and how you said earlier, he stuck to it. And because he stuck to it, he actually is kind of like, I kind of like this character because he was so arrogant, and it's so opposite of Keanu Reeves, who's like, sort of supposed to be like one of the nicest guys ever, and it's funny when you compare it to the Matrix. It's like in the Matrix, he sort of plays like Jesus in a way,
Oh
and
yeah,
yeah, and in here
they were
he's
going for
playing
the
like the
Christ
devil.
metaphors all over that trilogy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which I know. I mean, Resurrections is a whole other, that movie is just uh talk about. I don't think Jesus would be resurrected with a light bulb being screwed into his mouth, but
I didn't see Resurrections. I skipped it.
good, good.
I yeah,
It
it
it's unimaginably terrible. Like I just remember I had to see it twice because my brain had to process like, oh my God, was it really that bad? I'm gonna see it again. I saw it again. I'm like, yeah, it was that bad.
oh man,
Yeah.
poor bastard.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than sitting through a really bad long movie only to realize that to give it a fair shake, you have to watch it again.
Yeah.
That's why I'm scared to death of Avatar 2. Um,
Well, yeah, because Avatar 1 wasn't really that interesting. It was more there for the thrill of seeing something in 3D where you feel like you're in this world. Like the story's almost like secondary. And if I'm gonna guess I don't know, like they made a big deal of the Avatar 2 trailer. That was like a big public thing, and they're like, "Do you want to go see that?" I'm like, no, I'll just see the movie when it comes out and be amazed like with what's there in front of me. If I am amazed, if I don't just get motion sick and projectile vomit on the screen or something. But because I remember after I saw Avatar, I got that like weird feeling like when after you get out of like a roller coaster park where you feel like you're still on the ride and the room's
oh
kind of
yeah,
around. Yeah, I kind of got that like after I saw it.
man. I Yeah, I don't remember how I felt after Avatar 1 except just kind of, bored. It was like, yeah, the 3D was fine.
Yeah.
Um and I hear what you're saying about the Avatar 2 trailer because everyone's like, "Oh my God, I can't remember what movie it was in front of, but like you got to go see it just for the Avatar 2 trailer." And I watched the trailer. I finally saw it in a theater. I think I
Mhm.
saw it before DC League of Super Pets, and I was like, it just looks like more Avatar. Like
Yeah.
again, we kind of talked about this before we started, recording, but I don't know what James Cameron has spent 13 years doing in terms of things that are going to blow my mind because, and I'm willing to be convinced and converted in a month or so, but just looking at that trailer, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like when Monsters Inc. came out
Oh
and
yeah.
is the first time that they'd really done realistic or the hair to that degree on Sully, and people were
Mhm.
like, oh my god, this is a genuine innovation. And I felt that way too.
Yeah.
Watching Avatar 2, I'm like, where's the innovation? Like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, the sweat looks 12% more realistic on these characters in the jungle. Knock
Yeah.
me over with a spoon.
Yeah. And it's like,
um
didn't they have 3D like way, way, way back before this even? So it's like, oh, you're reimagining something, but it's not really that much of a reimagination if it's like the same thing.
yeah, so we'll find out, but let's get back to the devil's advocate. we're,
Yeah.
we're kind of winding it down, I think.
Well, I could tie this in. It was supposed to be an effects heavy movie, apparently, and they had to rewrite the script like 4 times so then Al Pacino would like accept doing it. And Keanu Reeves also took a cut in his budget for the movie so it could reach Pacino's asking price. And he
Wow.
also donated a large chunk of his budget to charity, I believe, because Keanu Reeves really is Jesus. I don't know.
Yeah, the more I hear about the guy, like that's what I love. I love the
Yeah.
internet because
Yeah.
last week was when I didn't read the article. I just read the probably out of context, maybe not, quotes from Matthew Perry talking about like, why is Keanu Reeves, allowed to walk around or whatever. And everyone just like, no, you don't, you
Yeah.
fuck with anybody else, but not Keanu
Yeah. But why was he going after Keanu Reeves? It's like, what did Keanu Reeves do to you? Did he shoot
What?
his dog?
Matthew Perry was the actual inspiration for John Wick. No, I read like the day after this came out, Perry released a statement saying that in the interview he was just trying to think of a name of like a celebrity, and he just like Keanu Reeves just popped in there, all Stay Puft Marshmallow Man style, and it was a really poor choice. But no one is buying that. They're like, yeah, you're just trying to save your ass, kid. Kid,
Yeah.
he's like 55. But
Yeah. Well, he's kind of a spoiled kid, but that's a whole other thing.
yeah, here's something that I'm surprised this hasn't become a meme, or maybe it has and I just haven't seen it. Mary, when she's discovered that she's been infertile, or she's infertile, can't have kids. She has a dream where there's like her baby is like holding her, uterus or
Ovaries.
something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
She screams at Kevin, "They took my ovaries!"
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
it's
I think she would at least know that was a dream, even if she was that hysterical. But then again, like the devil was playing with her perception of reality, you know?
the devil, like, and that was the really dark part of this.
Yeah.
The right before she gets committed to the mental institution where she kills herself, she goes to a church. She's like wrapped in a pink comforter,
Mm-hmm.
and she's talking about this story of how she was at her apartment and John Milton showed up and like was raping her all afternoon.
Yeah.
And Kevin is like, he's kind of crestfallen because he realizes that she is crazy because John Milton was in court with him all day.
Yeah.
But knowing what we know about John Milton, it's entirely possible that he was also, a beast form of him was in the apartment, doing unspeakable things. So yeah, she is a kind of a tragic character. And even though I was kind of giving her a hard time about being like the hysterical wife or whatever,
Yeah.
she is kind of the heart of this movie, and she has a tragic end, and it's only through her kind of fridging herself that Kevin is able to say, look, this is all wrong. I screwed up royally, and now I've got to go try and do the right thing, whatever that may be.
Right. I mean, he does get upset and he tries to kill Milton after she kills herself, but yeah, that does sort of give him the reason to commit suicide and then start over again. Uh, whether that happens again or not after the movie is something else. Um, yeah, talk about like Keanu Reeves being believable. He was pretty believable when she like killed herself in that hospital too. Like the level. I mean, I know you're just supposed to cry and all that, but it seemed to work. And, like,
It
that was the
it
most I've seen Keanu Reeves ever emote in a movie.
it works, but I also understand why he doesn't do it because again, my wife was in the room with me and she was watching that scene. And I think I had to freeze frame it or something, like to pause it for a second. I happened to freeze frame it on that face that he made. And it reminded us both of the James Vanderbeek meme of Dawson from Dawson's Creek crying, and he's got like the ugly cry face. I'm like, that's the fucking look. Don't do that
Yeah.
again, Keanu.
Oh, well, I mean, she did just slit her throat. What's wrong with the hospital security in that place? Like, it took them so long to get into her room. I'm just like, who runs this place?
Well, I don't know, but the devil certainly
Probably
has
double, yeah.
well, but what I loved is that the executive assistant, the one who gave Mary the little vanity to like, look at herself, and then that's when she revealed that she was also one of the demons. Mary freaks out, like smashes the vanity, and the lawyer lady gets glass in her face, and she's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, she went crazy and she cut me."
yeah.
I love that, like a scene later, you just see her as everyone's trying to get into the room. She's just like back in the corner. There's no blood. She's fine. And she's just like watching kind of like impassively. I'm like,
How
you
did that get
conniving.
in how did that get in the movie? Oh, wait, oh, that was on purpose? I thought you meant that was like a continuity error for a
No,
second.
I
She
think
was
I
just
think it
sitting
was
there like,
totally
oh,
on purpose. She was there to make it, to set that stage
uh,
to again kind of like push Mary over the edge. And so that she like playing the victim of like, oh, I'm so hurt. And then when the chaos starts, she just kind of like moved to the back, which is like standing in the corner watching it all happen.
oh, so she just
Yeah,
faked him out the whole time. She's one of the devil's little demons or whatever.
right. And that's
Yeah.
the thing is like she's set up early on as just being like, oh, this is Kevin, this is, whatever her name was. You kind of get the
She's
feeling, oh,
secretary number one. I don't thinking of
right.
I'm thinking of Ed Wood now.
Oh,
You can play the secretary.
but she keeps popping up in the movie and having and being involved in these really important conversations. So you realize she's not just, oh, let me Xerox that for you in triplicate, sir. She's like a mover and shaker in her own right. And you wonder how long she's been with this organization and how many other Kevins there might have been. Because Pacino alludes to the fact that he's tried this whole like father of the Antichrist thing and it keeps, falling apart for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that movie could like spawn off different versions of that movie with different appearances of the devil too, you know. But
Oh
let's
God. I
not
mean,
let's not give them sequels though. It works as one movie.
it does, but like
Yeah.
it makes me think about like what some of those other things might have been. Because I'm thinking of like famous maniacs through history, like was John Milton or a version of him like in the bunker with Hitler, and he's like, "It's not going to work out, kid." I gave you all of this and the ability to like invade, parts of Europe, and you're out down here in a box with your, stick wife. Like, what's going on?
You ever see
Oh,
Look Who's Back? It's a
look.
it's
Hmm.
a German comedy where Hitler like comes like just magically like reappears in modern day, and everyone thinks it's just like a guy playing a shtick, but it's really him. And what ends up happening is people start listening to his words and he starts to become popular again. It was like tied to like a whole Trump thing. And yeah,
Is this so it's a newer movie?
this came out like, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, something like that. Or four, it
Wow.
could have been 4 years ago. I'm not sure. But yeah, it was just about how Hitler comes back and everyone's like, oh, haha, yeah, you're being Hitler. You're not really him. And then he starts making these speeches, and people are like, he doesn't say anything about like the Jews or anything, but like they start like hearing him and they start agreeing with him. He starts
Wow.
persuading them in a way. Yeah.
I'll have to
And
check that out. That sounds
yeah,
interesting. Is it a
it's,
comedy or is it a
it
drama? What?
is. It's
Oh,
a
it's a
comedy,
wow.
but it's with like, yeah, deep social commentary. And it's actually really funny. Like one of the bits of the movie, it's like really twisted but hilarious, involving a dead dog. Yeah.
Again, back to John Wick. No, I do want to close
Yeah.
out by saying, as I mentioned, Craig T. Nelson of Poltergeist and Coach fame
Yeah.
shows up as this real estate mogul, developer, and client of Milton's law firm, a guy named Cullen, who
Yeah.
is accused and arrested for shooting his wife, his young son and the maid, and the Milton puts Kevin on the case. And it's this whole thing of like, it's a big risky deal because you got literally this rookie lawyer who should not be anywhere near this multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar developer's, future. But he gets on there and he builds a case around the fact that this guy was, stooping his secretary. So he couldn't have been committing these murders. But it turns out that that is not probably true. And I like that they leave it up to us to imagine like how this all played out. There wasn't like really a resolution to that, because I think around the time that would have been resolved is when Mary kills herself, and then that brings us right into the climax of this movie, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
No, because that was the case he was supposed to win, and I think he does win it, doesn't he? And then like she kills herself, or does it happen like in the middle of it?
You're right, he does win.
Yeah.
And then he gets, I think, in the cab, and then he goes and finds out that she's in the church. That's correct.
Yeah.
But he wins it, but I don't know if they don't really establish that he actually did do the murders. I think he just suspects it, right?
Yeah, they make it more sort of like mysterious, because they don't say if he was actually sleeping with the secretary at the time of the murder or if he was actually on the scene. Like, we don't know.
Right, because it's kind of like a weird storytelling thing, because he's doing a practice examination with the secretary in his office, and he's like going through it, like, where were you on the night of the whatever, and then he's like, is Mr. Cullen circumcised? And that trips her up. She doesn't know the answer to that. So it turns out they probably weren't, actually sleeping together, and he had probably just paid her off to be the scapegoat or whatever. But he ends up putting her on the stand. So we don't get to see that cross-examination. We don't know if the other attorney even brought up the circumcision thing. I imagine if he did, she would have known from the rehearsal to be convincing and bullshit her way out of it or whatever. But yeah, it's a one bit of a detail that's not really kind of tied up in this and building up to the climax.
Yeah, well, they kind of had like a lot of those cases in the movie where they seem like they won over the weekend or something like that, because like, the first case that Kevin wins, and then doesn't he win like a second case before he moves on to the third one, or he's just being introduced to everything, and then he's moved on to the murder case, which
it starts off with the voodoo one with Delroy Lindo's character.
That was it. The guy who was unsanitarily like chopping up meat in some basements. And it turns out like he could do that because that would be a violation of his religious beliefs if he wasn't allowed to just kind of like take these random animals and then just slice them to bits.
And again, it's great because he doesn't have to be like letter of the law legally sound. He just has to convince the jury, right?
Yeah.
And he makes some really interesting, compelling arguments about, people's religious practices just tend to be weird. What I liked is the setup to that scene. He goes to meet this guy and in this like dank candle strewn basement, and we see these like statues, they kind of like makeshift statues set up everywhere. When Kevin first goes into that area, we see one of the statues and a bunch of candles, and he's walking down this hallway and he hears the guy call to him, and he turns back, and I had to rewind to catch this, but he turns back and you see Delroy Lindo sitting there, and you're like, wait, I don't think anybody was sitting there. Did I just miss something? Was it a trick of the camera? There was a statue sitting there where when they turned the camera back around, it was replaced with Delroy Lindo. So there was a bit of like dark magic in that moment. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And he of course brings out a cow's tongue and puts nails through it, and that's supposed to represent be a voodoo doll for the other attorney he's going to go up against. And the guy literally chokes on his words in court, helping Keanu to win.
Oh yeah. And I guess in the IMDb, when I was reading on that, like everyone applauded like when the guy was done with the coughing, because I think he had to like do it all day or something like that. Yeah, but that was a great argument. He's saying, well, this is his religious belief. Like, who am I to tell anyone, or that, in America, we have the freedom to exercise our religion the way we want to. So he kind of ties it to this whole patriotic thing. And, that kind of persuades the court to get Delroy Lindo's character sort of off the case. But the great thing is, like you pointed out, there's always these little details in the movie that you can kind of rewind and find, when it comes to sort of omens and things leading up to the final ending and what everything means. Because it's like you question, is that Delroy Lindo really in there, or was that the devil, or how did he get there? Like if there was just randomly like a chair and then him there.
Yeah, or if is he a demon, or is he just like an agent of John Milton's? Because you almost get the feeling he is one of the people, much like he's kind of working for the firm, but he's not working in the firm. He's one of these peripheral characters that like a fixer type guy. But last thing, like I mentioned, Craig T. Nelson's character, this Cullen guy, sort of in relation to Trump. This would not have had the same connotations back in 1996, 97 as they would now.
Yeah.
But I mean, because Donald Trump's name is dropped early on at the cocktail party. They're like, oh, Trump was supposed to show up, but he was doing something else.
Yeah.
Right. But it's interesting because back in the day, he was more considered to be like a Manhattan liberal and not like a Republican firebrand. So I think because Kevin is introduced to two Republican like senators or congressmen, so I feel like that was meant to say that there are people from all, both political spectra are clients of this law firm, so they've got their fingers in every pie. But later on, when Kevin is interviewing Cullen at his apartment, you'll notice it is very much, if you've seen Trump's place like photographed or even described, it's like all gold and ornate, and like everything is just gold and kind of gaudy, and that was this guy's place.
Yeah, it's weird how art imitates life.
Yeah, is very odd. But I mean, and that's the other thing is like, if you're looking for parallels, like the way Craig T. Nelson plays Cullen, it is not like a full-on Trump caricature, even what he would have been like back in the mid-90s.
It was just Craig T. Nelson just sort of acting like a jerk and screaming at people. Like that was basically his character. He's like, you're gonna defend me, you better not fuck it up. I'm like, oh Jesus. I mean, he's under stress, but
again, there's that balance because there's the bit where, because he's having trouble with his or I guess his daughter is, I don't know what the deal is with his daughter, but he's got visitation for like an hour, and Kevin shows up to talk to him about the case. And so he misses the last 15 minutes of that visitation. And the agent of the state or whoever is like, hustling the daughter into a car. And they're like, you can see her again next week, sir. And he's like upset about it. Like genuine, like, I was supposed to have another 15 minutes, baby. I'm sorry. I'd come back. So it's, you get the feeling, the guy is probably a murderer, but he also has, like, we see that human side of him.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that he's sympathetic, but at least he's a human being.
Yeah. Well, I always found those to be the more interesting characters, like when you see There Will Be Blood, like that guy seems like an inhuman bastard, but a part of him does care about his son. And he seems to carry a certain sort of guilt, which is sort of why he kills the priest in the end. In a way, he's just sort of, that's him exercising his own guilt and how he rejects his son. But I always like those kind of characters where you don't understand them right away. You kind of have to pick them apart and know them over time.
Yeah. And I was glad to revisit The Devil's Advocate. I can't believe it's been 25 years, but this is a movie that I hadn't really thought about much. I think I'd seen it a couple of times in the last, couple of decades, but I feel like I'm going to watch this movie again in the next couple of years and maybe have even a better appreciation for it. Cause I'm like, I can finally take this film seriously now.
Yeah. It's funny. This movie was sort of like a big nostalgia thing for me. Like I was 13 years old, and that was definitely a movie with a lot of sexual stuff that, as a kid was impressionable on me. But also I remember that's when I was a big Pacino fan, big Godfather fan, and seeing him play the devil up, it was devilishly entertaining, if you will, and it's still devilishly entertaining today. And I think that's the thing. It's a fun movie, but it has some nuance and subtlety, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. You know, it knows how to have fun with itself, but it also knows like it strikes a balance between serious and kind of like goofball antics. And yeah, like and just how goofy Keanu Reeves is. Like it's actually worth watching just for that.
Right. And as we kind of talked about at the beginning of the show, it's not something we see much of today. I mean,
No.
like today, okay, we've got like horror is kind of making a renaissance, but it tends to be more like the monster movie or variety and slashers. You've got the tentpole like comic book movies, and then you've got the serious like socio-political agenda, art house Oscar movies. We don't really have these kind of in-between things that are, they're popcorn entertainment, but also have other things on its mind, but it's also not like, hey, did you read Twitter today?
Yeah.
It's broader than that. Yeah.
Yeah, because now everything has to hit like something that's within the popular spectrum, and this movie was more just about themes, and those and just sort of like spelling them out as bluntly as it does. It makes for a dramatically entertaining product that audiences can watch, and you can rewatch it and catch all the little details where the devil's playing with you, and just for rewatchability factor, it's always been fun. I mean, as a kid, I love seeing Al Pacino chew up the scenery, and that movie really is about the actors just having fun with what's in front of them. And yet, I have a feeling like Taylor Hackford didn't take this material like too close to the heart, considering like how all over the place everyone is. But that's kind of the charm of it. It's a movie that really goes there and goes as hard as it can, and for that you got to give it credit.
Yeah. It's something that just popped into my head. The idea of the whole Matrix thing, the Groundhog Day kind of element with Milton just kind of playing with Kevin until he gets the result he wants. It almost speaks truth to his speech about God being the absentee landlord, because if there is a force of good that is going up against, the devil, he is sort of allowing this to happen almost in its own little pocket universe. Like, what reality is being played out here? Is it, the reality that he created? Plus, Kevin says, I've read the Bible, of course, we lose.
Yeah.
And Pacino seems to make the case like,
well, consider the
sure,
source. Yeah.
right. But he's like, I want to pile the bodies or the souls so high up there that, we're going to basically give him a run for his money, because what else is he going to do? Like this, it's sort of like this race towards destiny. So it kind of makes you wonder, what really is going on, the big picture of like God and Satan, and how does this, how do we figure into all of this?
How would this movie play today if they made it? Like, they'd probably try to make it more subtle, and it probably wouldn't be as entertaining, because they keep trying to restrain themselves.
Well, also, I think there'd be more of an religious message in here, because that's one of the things I appreciate is it takes, without really taking a side, it takes religion and religious people seriously in a way that, again, doesn't turn them into, hypocrites or cartoon characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think I'd want to see a remake of The Devil's Advocate.
No, it's good the way it is, and everything already gets remade. And aren't they actually releasing now a new Christmas Story with Ralphie like returning home or something like that? Didn't they already make that straight to video? Like, do we need that?
I know they made like Christmas Story 2 or something. I've heard about the new Christmas Story. I've avoided watching. There's like a teaser or something. Like, I want my childhood to remain intact, and it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
As I've learned from my hiatus on comic book movies in the last, almost year, I don't have to watch everything. I'm perfectly content to move on with my life.
Well, did you see that? Oh, I think we did share that meme in our like little private message thing where it's like, it looks like Shark Boy and Lava Girl now, the Ant-Man Quantumania trailer, like side by side, like they're almost exactly the same. It's sad.
And I dare say it'll probably be about as memorable. Anyway, Mike Crowley, hope you'll probably agree. Thanks so much for hanging out and talking Devil's Advocate. It's a lot of fun.
You.
We gotta chat more. I miss you, man.
I know, I miss you too. I need to get back out into it. I've been too busy with other stuff, but I'm starting to. I think once the Oscar season slows down, I'll be able to really get online more. But in the meantime, like, I gotta think of some we gotta talk about. I'm sure there's some movies. I gotta think of some Christmas movies, unconventional ones I've done before. And there's definitely some gems out there. I remember we did Batman Returns. That's an unconventional Christmas movie.
Oh yeah. But hey, I'm even happy to talk about Oscar stuff because
Oh
I've
yeah.
not most of my year has been spent not watching stuff that's been in theaters. I'm like
Yeah.
watching a lot of
Yeah.
older things, so I'm gonna have a lot of catching up to do, and I might need someone to to help me through it. But yeah.
I'm trying to catch up to all. I've been just doing the film festival. There's like so many movies at the same time. I'm like, I don't know. It felt like it was every movie everywhere all at once.
Well, which is another movie I need to see.
Oh,
But
that one was great. Yeah, I remember I saw it. I was so tired when I saw it. Anyway, but it was. I have to see it again.
all right. Well, we will catch up later. Again, thanks a lot, man. Take care and happy Halloween.
Yes, happy Halloween. Get plenty of candy and plenty of treats and all that stuff.
I
And don't be
shall.
tempted by the devil.
Yes. Always good advice to end a show on.
Yeah, yeah. If Al Pacino opens up the door, well, you can accept candy from him. He's just an actor. It's just a character.
As far as we know.
As far as we know. Like if you see like someone having an orgy behind him, close the door. Don't let your kids see that.
I might ask the kids to stay outside for a few minutes, and then I mean, look, last note, Connie Nielsen didn't need to get naked for this movie. I mean, I'm not complaining that she did, but she is so great. She's such a presence in this film
Yeah.
that that's like the definition of sexy.
Yeah, well, that movie had a lot of like, did Charlize Theron have to get naked in the church with the scars all over her and all that?
No, and that was almost like that one of those. It's almost one of those anti-FAP things where it's like, you want to freeze frame it, but then you realize, yeah, she's full frontal, but she's also covered in scars and crying. Like, I don't think that's not the intent that Mr. Skin would have.
Well, we know of Mr. Skin's existence. Actually, a Chicago-based company, I found out.
I know some things. I'm not going to share them here, but yeah, we'll catch up later. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, man. Take it easy and we'll catch you later.
Take it easy, man.
All right, bye.